Ready or Not is a tactical FPS that had gotten a lot of attention when it first launched, and it has actually been sitting at very positive on Steam. A lot of people really enjoyed it, thought it was a pretty good experience, but now that it's time for it to finally release on console, we know that across the board there is a case of censorship. They are toning down gore, they are toning down nudity, and instead of actually addressing these concerns with their community, it seems that they're kind of blowing up over on their Steam community page because not only are gamers voicing how unhappy they are with this decision, but they're also locking down a ton of random threads. They don't seem to want to actually respond to any of these criticisms, and it's looking pretty rough for Void Interactive. I have a few different things to show off, but before I get into the topic, if you enjoy the content I create, check out the links in the description, join the community in my live streams, and consider supporting through Patreon or YouTube memberships. Now, I did another video on this topic, and it will be linked down below, but a lot of people were very upset, and rightfully so, because this is a game that had gone into early access and then fully released in 2023. And so you might have had your product for yourself in your library for years at this point, but unfortunately across the board it is getting censored. So it's not like it's just the console launches where things are getting slightly toned down. No, even if you own it on Steam, from what they are confirming, it is being altered, which sucks because of course if you've already put say 100 hours into it, you're not going to be able to get a refund. It's not like they're going to allow people to get their money back if they're unhappy with this decision. And this is a game that had already faced quite a bit of controversy in the past. So back in 2022, Ethan Gotch over at Kotaku got so bothered by some of the content he saw in this game that they actually felt the need to put out a statement and apologize and then vow to remove this content. So regarding the level of props that have been mentioned, these are placeholder assets that were put in place to fill the otherwise bare spaces and were supplied by a contractor we no longer use. These assets will be replaced as we continue to develop the game. And regarding the red pill boxes specifically, these were intended to solely be a reference to the Matrix movie. A noggin jogger is slang for an activity or challenge that messes with the mind and is commonly used as a reference to complex puzzles or brain teasers. They are taking the allegations seriously, and rest assured that the dev team was not aware of any hateful connotations with the aforementioned prop. So they basically bent the knee to Kotaku years ago, which was a major turnoff for a lot of people. But now we have this brand new situation on our hands, which is 10 times worse in my opinion, because we're finding out that they are trying to release it on console, and instead of creating two different versions, like the one that they need to put onto Xbox and PlayStation that they're saying needs to be toned down a bit for the platform holders, and then one version being for Steam, they are censoring this game across the board. So if you had purchased this game years and years and years ago, your version of your game is now going to be altered, which is ridiculous in my opinion. And of course, they're going to say that, oh my gosh, it would take so much time and effort. I don't care. You are a developer. It is your job to make the game. What else am I supposed to say, right? It's your job to make the game. Therefore, the game is already made. Why not just make another version or a patch for console that only affects the console version? But nope, across the board, it's now getting toned down. So they had put up this post over on Steam where they were talking about it because it had said, "Attention officers, welcome to the 87th edition of our Ready or Not development briefing." Hey, at least they tried to keep people up to date with what their plans were for the game. But it says, "Speaking of which, there are a variety of animation changes that have been made for SWAT. These are new animations that will continue to be tweaked as time goes on, considering the vast amount added. Also in this briefing, we will outline some limited changes that have been made to the game for console certification standards." Of course, they try to frame it as a limited number of changes, and it's just going to be a few, and there's a handful of alterations, as if it's not that serious. And hey, you might think to yourself, a little bit less dismemberment or gore or a little bit less nudity might not be that big of a deal, but it is a slippery slope. They previously censored for Kotaku. Why wouldn't they censor for Kotaku again if Kotaku got upset? This is the problem, okay? I get that companies want to release their product on as many platforms as possible, but all you are doing now is giving the finger to the people who have already monetarily supported you in the past by altering the version of the game that they already own. So they talk about dismemberment and how player-induced dismemberment still has a large presence in the game, but is a little more limited as to when it occurs. It is a slippery slope when it comes to censorship. Oh, we're just changing this a little bit, tweaking this a little bit. Then 5 years down the road or 2 games later, their games are completely sanitized. When alive enemies are shot, they can undergo dismemberment. However, once they are dead, no further dismemberment occurs. Then they talk about nudity. Some instances of explicit nudity for a handful of civilians and one suspect have been covered up a bit more. I hate this wording. They try to make you seem like, oh, well, it's not actually that serious. But if you head on over to their Steam discussions tab, oh boy, are people furious, and rightfully so. You've paid for a product, it shouldn't be altered years down the line. It's very similar to what happened with Skullgirls. And if you really start paying attention to how the Steam general discussions community tab has been ran for years at this point, it doesn't look good, because they have locked down tons of threads in the past where people are simply asking, like, oh hey, are there any plans to bring this game to Mac users? Or how about this problem I'm facing, lost single player progression, which I'll show in a minute. But it just goes to show that in the past, they have locked down very legitimate threads and they haven't wanted people actually criticizing their work or raising questions. So I don't think our criticisms now about what they're doing in censoring are really going to get into their heads. Like, I don't think that we are going to see them drastically change directions and go, you know what, we actually need to start listening to our customers now. Are there any plans to bring the game for Mac OS users too? And somebody said, great question, but only the devs can answer this. I really don't get the lack of transparency. It could happen or it might not, but an official response would at least give us some clarity. And they locked this thread? Why would you do that? It's not like people are sitting here and arguing and yelling at each other. They're just asking for a little bit of transparency. Here's another one from back in 2023, which I thought was interesting. Talked about how they were losing single player progression and they were trying to click on new game options, and the game asked them to do a tutorial, which they agreed and proceeded to do. It was a fine thread. The topic has been locked, and the reason why I wanted to show this is just so you can see that they have a track record of silencing users who are asking just legitimate questions. But looking at the newer posts, they're not locking those down yet, but there are so many that are now being added to the Steam discussions tab. So many people who are just rightfully very disappointed. This person said, heard the censorship was to appease Kotaku. Is that true? Initially, they censored the game to appease Kotaku. Not right now, but they previously had. And they responded with, unless Kotaku is code phrase for certification boards, regional, publisher, country, etc., then no, the changes are happening because RON would not be certified for console release without making the required changes, and having 2 different builds isn't feasible for workload or crossplay. It is feasible. I'm sorry. There are plenty of studios that do this. And at the end of the day, right, all you're doing now is making yourselves look worse, because you're basically saying, oh, that'd be too much work and effort for us. It's your job to make games, so get back to making games. It's that simple. People are also gesturing him, which I think is just so hilarious. There are tons of people saying that they were loyal supporters, they had put a lot of time and effort into the game, but they no longer want to support it and they want refunds. How much bribe did you take from the console manufacturers? I want a refund. You caused this. The moment you thought imposing any censorship of any kind on PC was a bad idea, you created the censorship situation and you aren't fixing it because you are lazy, and no, it isn't something you have to do to the PC version. That excuse is a complete joke. lots of people talking about how unfortunate this was and how they were someone who bought into the early access build. Unfortunately, the devs removed modes and the performance of the game significantly tanked after 1.0. I know I have a potato PC at this point, so I was willing to wait for a console release until I found the cash for a new PC. Now with the censorship, I want this game refunded and out of my account. I'm done. The game already had to compromise before changing the settings of the school level. However, that was before the content was even in the game. Refund now, you sellouts. And I don't think that they're going to do any mass refunds. Maybe if enough people are asking for refunds, Steam will kind of see the situation and then decide to give the money back to specific individuals. But we know how Steam is. They made money years ago off this, so they don't want to have to pay out for it now. So I'll be keeping my eye on this, though the response from the developers on Steam have not been super positive so far, and judging by the history of them locking down threads, I just have a bad feeling about this all around, that our voices are not going to matter to them. But I'm still going to talk about it. I'm still going to put up videos and make posts about it over on X so that more people can become aware of this. But that's all that I really had to discuss in this video. Let everyone know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this, give it a like, and if you didn't, give it a dislike. I appreciate your support either way, but I'll talk to you all again in the next video really soon.